I just want to welcome you all to this time that we have together today. My name is Reverend Joselyn Spence, and I serve as the Director of Mental Health and Wellness for the National Benevolent Association of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And as we get started, I'll invite folks to share in the chat where you may be joining us from this morning. Uh, and as you add where you're joining us from this morning, I'll just share a little bit more about who we are. If this is your first time joining NBA for one of our webinars, one of our events, we are a general ministry of the Disciples Church. And as a general ministry, we collaborate with leaders and with health and social service organizations to strengthen and transform communities through compassion, healing, and justice. Our mental health and wellness program focuses on creating communities of compassion and care with an integrated vision of wellness that prioritizes a holistic approach centered in justice, equity, theology, spirituality, and clinical awareness. Today's summit was birthed out of our Mental Health Sunday service workshop that we held just this year in the month of March, where attendees provided some feedback to us that they desired more opportunities and time to discuss key concerns and strategies for navigating mental health and wellness in their congregations and their faith-based organizations. And so this summit was designed to equip you all, clergy, with some essential mental health knowledge to better support yourselves and your congregations. And so through our sessions today and our practical discussions, we will explore how to recognize mental health challenges and respond with care, how to effectively build partnerships with community mental health, and learn how to intentionally weave mental health and wellness awareness into every aspect of congregational life, from sermons and small groups to outreach and pastoral care. As we acknowledge the emotional demands of ministry, this summit will also offer some practical tools to support clergy well-being as you become informed, compassionate leaders and promoting mental well-being in your faith communities. So note that during this time together today, you can follow along via automated transcription using the AI-generated captions. You can look for the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will also be able to share questions and answers as each session is coming to an end. But please drop your questions in the chat at any time or your comments as well as we're moving together. So let me see in the chat where we have folks joining us from today. Okay, Concord, California, Dallas, Texas, Brownsville, Pennsylvania, Tulsa, Oklahoma, welcome. Washington, D.C., Alden, Pennsylvania, Fort Washington, Maryland. The Christian Church capital area is here today. And we have Mississippi, Santa Clara, California. Welcome. We're so glad to have you with us today. And hopefully, I'm trusting that by the time we get to our discussion, our smaller groups to have conversation, our webinar format will be shifted by then. As I noted, we're waiting on our tech team to take care of some things for us. But before we get into the full flow of our day together, I want us to pause to center ourselves in preparation for the learning, the creation, and the connection that we will experience today. So I invite you to put down anything that might be in your hands and just rearrange yourself in your seat so that you're just a little more comfortable and feeling a little more grounded. And here I'll invite you to close your eyes, or if you're unable to close your eyes for any reason, just lower your gaze at something that you can focus on. And as we sit here for this moment, let us focus in on our breath. As the breath flows in and the breath flows out. As we use our breath and bring even more awareness to our breath, as a form of gratitude, as a form of gratefulness that we're here and able to learn together. As you breathe, you might bring to mind something that you are grateful for, or there might be an affirmation or a prayer, a short prayer that rises to mind. And as you inhale and exhale at your own pace, welcome in more of those prayers and those affirmations. Welcome in more of that gratitude and send out gratitude with your exhales. And so we'll move into a moment of silence where we can all focus in on what we are grateful for. We'll now invite us into just a couple of rounds of box breathing where we will inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, and then hold again. And as we do this box breath and really center and ground ourselves, we're focusing on the breath and just clearing the mind so that we are able to receive as we move into the rest of our time together. And so now let us inhale 2, 3, 4, and hold 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, and last big inhale and exhale. Just notice in this moment any shift from when we first began together to now. And I invite you to just wiggle your fingers and toes and just bring some light movement into the body by swaying. You might stretch your arms out at your sides. And sometimes this is a place where people yawn. When you are ready, I invite you to slowly blink your eyes open. And did someone have a question? I see a hand raised. If you have a question, if you want to put it in the chat. Give a moment, or maybe that was an accident. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna go ahead and move into this first part of our time together. I'm so pleased this morning to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. LaVerne Collins. Dr. Collins is a national certified counselor and owner of a private practice and counselor training company, New Seasons Counseling, Training, and Consulting Incorporated, as well as the owner of Collins Christian Life Coaching. Working as a counselor, writer, professional coach, mentor, trainer, workshop presenter, minister, and serial entrepreneur for over 25 years, she has vast experience in helping people and organizations manage life's unexpected crises, grief and loss issues, relationship issues, and mental health. Dr. Collins is the author of 2 books, The Fruit of Your Pain, Experiencing Spiritual Renewal Through Seasons of Struggle, and Overlooked, Counselor Insights for the Unspoken Issues in Black American Life. Additionally, she has published several works in professional textbooks and trade publications, including a 2-year Honoring Diversity series focused on cultural competence and clinical work for American Counseling Association's Counseling Today magazine. She is also a contributing author to Multicultural Counseling, Responding with Cultural Humility, Empathy, and Advocacy, and Sage Encyclopedia of Multicultural Counseling, Social Justice, and Advocacy. In addition to various clinical roles, Dr. Collins served as the Program Director and Interim Vice President for the National Board of Certified Counselors Foundation and Professional Services Division. She was also an adjunct professor and lecturer in counselor education and development at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. And currently, she serves on the Industry Advisory Council for the University of Phoenix. Dr. Collins has a dual bachelor's degree from Syracuse University and an MS Ed in Community Counseling from Tuskegee University. She holds a PhD in Christian counseling from South Florida Bible College and Theological Seminary. She is certified in coaching, clinical supervision, grief, trauma, integrative nutrition coaching, telehealth counseling, and addiction counseling. And I am so grateful that we are having her again for the 3rd time, as Dr. Collins was a keynote speaker at our 2022 virtual Mental Health Professionals Conference. And then in 2023, when we moved to hybrid and having an in-person component to the conference in San Antonio, Texas. And this will not be the last time that we have her with us, because people continue to rave about her sharings, her wisdom, her knowledge. And so we are so grateful to have you here, Dr. Collins, and I will turn it over to you.
Together. Thank you so much for the very kind welcome and that beautiful introduction that makes me feel so busy. It sounds like I really have a full life. Oh, I do have a full life, but yeah, it's kind of nice to nice to hear that the work that I do is appreciated. So thank you for that. I am so grateful for the opportunity to be here today and to share with everyone. Today, just with respect for the task at hand and the request that has gone out for more supports and information around mental health needs, I felt compelled, led to bring you a primer on trauma-informed ministry care. So we're going to call this the fruit of their pain. Much of this is taken from the 2nd edition of my book, The Fruit of Your Pain. It's about experiencing spiritual renewal through seasons of struggle. So I'm subtitling this, Guiding People to Spiritual Renewal Through Their Seasons of Struggle. And again, it's a primer on trauma-informed ministry, where we will talk about just that: mental health, trauma, how it shows up, and how to provide trauma-informed ministry care. So we're going to define trauma first and trauma-informed ministry care. We're going to examine what happens in the face of trauma, and then basic concepts of trauma-informed care. We are living in a time where traumatic experience, I'll say, is rising. More and more people find themselves struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, or as many people would say, they are trying to experience post-traumatic growth. But what actually is trauma? with everything going on, let's put a real definition to it. Trauma is the result of an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances. Now, the operative word here is that trauma is the result of an event. We describe the events as traumatic events. So take note of that. A traumatic event produces trauma. The traumatic event is something that's experienced or some circumstances in this individual's life that are physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening to the self or someone that you care about. The important thing to remember about traumatic experiences is that trauma has or brings lasting adverse effects. But trauma is actually the effect on the body. Trauma is what's carried in the body after or in the midst of these adverse situations. It's an approach, trauma-informed care is an approach that aims to engage people who have histories of traumatic events and trauma in their body. A trauma-informed care approach recognizes the presence of those trauma symptoms and acknowledges the role that trauma has played in an individual's life. So I like to use the analogy of a tree, and scripture does that throughout. One of my favorites is Psalm 1, those first three verses. Let me just read those to you from the NIV version. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams, some versions say rivers of water, which yields or brings forth its fruit in due season, and whose leaf does not wither, and whatever they do prospers. This tree image, wow, glorious, isn't it? Look at that. Look at that fruitfulness. Look at that fruitfulness. It's amazing. You can practically see the glory of the Lord around it, around the tree. And we know that the Bible tells us that uh, the fruits of the Spirit, what we see at the top of the tree, right? Love, joy, peace, gentleness, patience, faithfulness, goodness, kindness, and self-control. The fruits of the Spirit are the evidences. It's what the Spirit of the Lord produces within us. It's the evidence that that God rules and reigns in our hearts, and evidence that our lives are representing the Lord well, because the fruit of our lives is just like God: love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, kindness, self-control. And every tree has roots, and we have roots in the biological sense. We have roots in the psychological sense. We have roots in the social sense, and we have roots in the spiritual sense. What do I mean by that? Biologically, our roots include things like our genetics, um, our 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 stewardship of our health, our bodies. Those are all part of the root system that feed this life that the Bible likens to a tree. Psychologically, we have roots. Our thoughts, our emotions, we can get rooted solidly when our thoughts and emotions are healthy. Socially, we are rooted in relationship with other people, and spiritually, of course, we want to be rooted in Christ. That's a tree planted by the rivers of living water. But the reality is that for many people, in this day and age, could really say most people, the majority of people, have experienced trauma or carrying trauma, I should say, carrying trauma as a result of the traumatic events that they have experienced. So, in my trainings and in my book, I like to use this trauma tree. I'll explain how this depicts what many of us see in ministry from individuals who struggle in relationship, they struggle in communication, they struggle with mental health and relational health. They struggle to sometimes work in community, to work collaboratively. And, when you're in ministry, you see all kinds of people, all kinds of personalities. And sometimes we tend to say, I wonder what's going on there. I wonder what that's about. Try not to be judgmental, but sometimes you do become frustrated. Sometimes it feels like what you're saying and even what you're ministering may be falling on deaf ears. You're wondering what you can do to help them with their mental health, their perceptions, their experiences. I'm going to show you what's many times going on and yet overlooked. If we look at this tree, use it as a model representing a person. What we see at the top, the leaves, the fruit, let's call that the behavior, the fruitfulness. Those behaviors, those problems, symptoms, even if you will, could be represented by the branches. And the branches, from a mental health perspective, would be like the diagnosis. The trunk would be the bodily system stress that an individual finds himself under, and the roots, those biopsychosocial, sometimes even spiritual roots, have been marred by traumatic experiences. And the traumatic experiences in those roots travels through that tree, just as the roots of a tree uh, receive the nutrients from the soil and carry the nutrients through the tree for growth. What happens when, in a human being, the roots are choked by traumatic experiences? From a mental health perspective, those behaviors, the first thing we see, abusive behavior, fearful behavior, non-compliance with guidelines or expectations, resistance to change, resistance to anything that might feel threatening to them. It may not feel threatening to anyone else, but they resist because it feels threatening to them. We see substance use as a means of relief seeking. We see anger, we see mistrust, and we see all manner, truthfully, all those things there come from all manner of diagnoses: depression, anxiety, dementia, substance use disorders, hypertension. Wow, yeah. I'm putting a few out there for example's sake, but there are so many combinations of symptoms that make up a diagnosis. Now, what I really want to tell you that a lot of people outside the mental health profession don't know is that a diagnosis is just a symptom list. So if a person is diagnosed with, say, a depressive disorder, it simply means that there are certain problems, certain features of the individual's presence, certain features of their inner world that tend to sit together. A diagnosis is just a way of using one term instead of listing all seven or all nine that the person experiences. So that's why the branch is like a diagnosis, because from that diagnosis you have the problems, the experiences, the features, the symptoms. With depression, those symptoms and features may be a sense of hopelessness, maybe a change in eating habits, either eating more or eating less. With depression, you might also have um, avoidance of other people. You might have crying spells that feel uncontrollable. There might be a sense of with your life not being valued, not having value. You might lose interest in the things that were once very important to you. You might find irritability, or you might find the person being lethargic. Those are the kinds, just a handful of the things that represent depression. So when you have a branch called depression, then you have as many as 9 or maybe more experiences that are documented that make up depression. So that's why the diagnoses are branches that produce the fruit at the top. But where do these diagnoses come from? Oh, the trunk, the core, the core. Psychological stress on your endocrine system, stress on your hormones, oxidative stress, inflammation. Did you know that inflammation in the body is tied to depression? hmm And I could list distress in any of our core functions, our circulatory system, our digestive system. And you think about that circulatory system, the heart, and yeah, you think about what else? Our digestive tract. Digestive tract feels stress many times in very uncomfortable ways. Those core bodily systems come under stress because of what? The traumatic experiences that people have. Woo, look at all that red, will you? My goodness. Let's just look at a few. Sexual assault and rape, stereotyped judgments, natural disasters, presumption of guilt. This is something that's not typically named. But if you are a member of a marginalized, racialized, or otherized community, and you carry, because of your identity, a presumption of guilt, when when something happens, you're almost presumed uh, guilty rather than presumed innocent until proven guilty. You're assumed guilty. Think about the stress of that. The death of a child, the impact of something like COVID or any other health crisis, hurricanes, early losses. The earlier you begin to lose people who are first degree relatives in your family, the more stress the body comes under and the greater the likelihood of experiencing depression in adulthood. Racism and hate crimes, poverty, historical trauma. Some of these things are direct and first person experiences. Some can be inherited. When I say you don't inherit an experience, but our bodies, um, our bodies are so miraculous. You are wired to survive the environment that your ancestors survived. Think about that. You are hardwired, physically wired, to physically survive whatever your ancestors survived. You may know some of what they survived, and you may not know what they survived. But I'll give you one good example that the research shows speaks to this phenomenon. We call it epigenetics. The descendants of Holocaust survivors some were invited into this research study to test their stress hormones. Do you know that 3 and 4 generations later, descendants of Holocaust survivors still had altered stress hormone profiles? That's what I mean when I say historical trauma, because they are still 3 and 4 generations later wired to survive the environment that their ancestors survived. I doubt that that's only true for descendants of Holocaust survivors. So there's a lesson there that tells us, hey, we may not be paying as much attention to everything that a person carries. Now, any of these is heavy, it's weighty. What about when you're carrying a half dozen, a dozen over the course of your life? So Rumi says maybe you are searching among the branches for what only appears in the roots. Maybe you're looking for the reason for their anger or their mistrust. You're looking at that, you're looking at the behavior. You might even be looking at the diagnosis, which is still a way of looking at the behavior because it's just a way of classifying the behaviors into groups, into clusters, just for the sake of identification. Never for the sake of labeling a person, just for the sake of identifying the experiences that they have in their mind and in their bodies and in their behaviors. We're looking among the branches when we should be looking at the roots. So maybe we need to heal the root so the tree will be stable. I hope this is making sense to you. Heal the root. Let's get down here and look at the history of sexual assault or rape, the presumption of guilt, racism, early losses, hurricanes, hate crimes, natural disasters. And there's so many more things I could list. Wartime. There's war trauma, obviously. And sometimes trauma is not military trauma is not necessarily limited just to frontline battle. Military trauma it's much more diverse than that, unfortunately. So keep this in mind, and I'm gonna now go into, you know, what's next. What do we need to understand in order to explore these traumatic experiences and to explore what it means to create a safe space in ministry for people who carry this trauma. Let's ask this question. What happens to the traumatized body, and why is trauma behavior so misunderstood? In our role as ministers, we're called upon to visit people in hospitals and nursing homes, and sometimes you hear from relatives and hospital staff that, boy, they really this person gets really aggressive and really acts out in some ways. Here you've got a male resident who's about to throw his food tray at a staff person. You can just see like he is looking right through that person, and that tray is about to fly. You have an older male here who lifts his crutch to threaten the staff person. She's shrinking back now. She's afraid. Another resident or patient picks up her walker and shakes it at a staff person. So you go into a nursing home or rehab, you go into a hospital, and seems like there's this overreactivity. And you're wondering, what's that about? It's what really happens to the brain in trauma. Because the person may experience neutral situations as threatening, things that would be benign to another individual feels very unsafe to someone who's carrying trauma in the brain. The limbic system, let me preface what I'm about to say. I didn't go to medical school because I didn't want to deal with medical school. But I did learn that there were some things I needed to learn about the brain to be effective, both as a counselor and as a minister of the gospel. Limbic system. The limbic system is the part of the brain that's involved in our behaviors and our emotional responses, especially when it comes to the behaviors that we need for what? Survival. And this system in the brain gets flooded with stress hormones. And guess what? When it's always being flooded with stress hormones, that state of stress becomes the normal. And that person essentially gets stuck in their fight, flight, or freeze mode. They get stuck in stress. So something innocent and benign comes along and they're hypersensitive and they seem to overreact to a neutral situation. This is what's really happening to the brain when that person is carrying a history of traumatic events. That is the trauma brain. The individual constantly feels on edge. Nothing seems to help. The emotional trauma gets physically stuck in your body and becomes your normal. Wow. So you're always on high alert, hypervigilant, and I'll explain what happens to the body when you're in that condition. It's like a gas pedal and a brake pedal. The balance system in the brain has a sympathetic nervous system that is like the gas pedal, and a parasympathetic nervous system. It's like a brake pedal. When the gas pedal kicks in like automatically, think like cruise control, okay? Um, you don't even have to have your foot on the pedal, but it's going. And what is it doing? It's giving a fight or flight response. So a person is either becomes very argumentative and defensive, or they totally step away, they avoid. These are the people that were very active, perhaps, in your congregations, in your ministries, and suddenly you don't see them anymore. And you wonder what happened. And then you find out that they were upset about something. Fight or flight, gas pedal. It's about protection and survival because something doesn't feel safe. It is a stress response, and those adrenal glands, your stress glands, get activated. And that's how they can say that the stress hormone profiles of the descendants of Holocaust survivors are still heightened compared to peers of the same age, even 3 and 4 generations after the Holocaust. Adrenal glands, cortisol, stress hormone profiles elevated because the gas pedal kicked in to fight or flight because something didn't feel safe. On the other hand, you've got a brake pedal. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. The brake pedal is what allows you to rest and relax, digest your food again, allows you to grow and develop. It's a tug of war going on. I'll talk about that in a little bit. These two systems are fighting. But when you've been through significant traumatic events and experiences, that gas pedal kicks in faster than you can even control. And when that gas pedal kicks in, you're in sympathetic system dominance. And the brain is being bathed in this hormonal and neurochemical cocktail. I don't know if you can see the image well and recognize what it is, but that is a brain with a scrub brush in a bathtub being bathed in this hormonal and neurochemical cocktail that interferes with new protein production and interferes with building pathways. It builds pathways built on being in a state of arousal so that that becomes the normal. Pathways are just the patterns, the the patterns that our brain operates in. are just, well, that's a simple way of saying neural pathways. So it builds neural pathways telling you what to do based on the expectation of always being in a state of arousal or a state of fear, uncertainty, danger, insecurity. So when you compare the trauma brain with the resting brain, okay, the gas pedal brain with the brake pedal brain, the gas pedal is the trauma brain, accelerated heart rate, constricted blood vessels, raised blood pressure, muscle tension, the amplification of physical sensations, the inhibition of insulin production to maximize fuel, cold hands and feet, and headaches. The resting brain, on the other hand, is what keeps your resistance to infection, for instance, at uh, at optimal levels. Your resistance is low when you're in trauma brain. Intestinal motility, fuel storage, promoting digestion, releasing the endorphins that keep you feeling well and having a hopeful state of mind, bringing down the heart rate, bringing down the blood pressure, bringing down the body temperature, helping you manage your insulin levels. Now, consider this. If 3 and 4 generations after the Holocaust, the stress hormone profiles are still altered in their descendants, sometimes we speak about genetic predispositions, and we say that people of a certain race, certain culture, have higher predispositions toward hypertension, diabetes, heart disease. It makes sense when you understand that those are the organ systems affected by trauma. And remember, you are biologically carrying brain signals to allow you to quickly respond to threats in the environment that your parents and ancestors had to survive. No wonder. No wonder, for instance, African Americans have a higher risk of heart disease, stroke, hypertension, diabetes. The trauma of slavery, if you are a descendant of enslaved people. And the behaviors carry over as well. With that sympathetic nervous system, we activate our survival system under high stress. Reactivity is the correct response. Now, this is important because our treatment systems, our mental health systems, is quick to point a finger and judge someone because of their behavior and treat their behavior as if it's pathological, as if it's atypical, it's abnormal, it's dysfunctional. We talk about family dysfunction. Well, the reaction might not be logical. The reaction might not be rational or reasonable, but their reactivity is the correct physiological response to danger. The problem is they're not supposed to always be in that state. So when I'm working as a counselor, when I'm working with people, we never start with anger management, for instance, because there's too much going on in the brain, which I'll explain in a moment, for anger management to kick in for these tools and techniques. What gets dysregulated? What gets shut down? Should only be a temporary thing, should only be a temporary state. It is your brain is supposed to shut down those systems temporarily so that your fuel, your energy, everything about you can respond to the crisis with either fight or flight, for instance. But with trauma histories, especially when you talk about developmental trauma in children, is that the person gets in that Sympathetic nervous system, gas pedal mode, that's designed for survival, and they stay in it too long, suppressing non-essential systems. And every system in our body is essential. We're talking about non-essential for fight or flight. Okay? Suppresses those symptoms that you really do need in order to stay healthy. That is trauma. What I just described, that's trauma. So trauma is not just an event. Trauma is the body's response when a person doesn't feel safe, whether it's physical safety or emotionally safety, whatever. That's when the event becomes traumatic. And when you're in that hot system dominance for a long period of time, as I said before, we treat it as dysfunctional, as unhealthy. So what gets diagnosed as a behavior problem in kids and what gets diagnosed as a psychiatric problem in adults is really just the experience of the system working the way it's supposed to when a person is in danger or when there's a threat. You can be chased by a lion so many times, symbolically. Let the lion be whatever is on your tail in today's world. You can be chased by a lion so many times that you become extremely sensitive to four-legged animals that have a tail and a brown and a tail and a brown brown fur. You can respond to a squirrel. You can be as if it's a lion. You can be chased by a lion so many times that you begin to run from squirrels, things that are not dangerous. But from your perspective, they're all the same. It startles you, catches you off guard. So trauma brain looks at today's squirrels, today's harmless creatures, today's minor slights, and sees yesterday's growling lions and responds with fight or flight. And in ministry, we see strong reactions and don't understand them. But it's the body's threat response system, in many cases, responding to the trauma that the person has experienced. Now, this system is like a radar system. It's like an environmental filter. It's always looking for things that are relevant to you and those whom you love regarding safety. Now, this system can access your entire physiology in just 15 milliseconds. In other words, that system can activate 8 or 9 times before your good judgment system, your executive system, can even kick in once. Hear that? 8 or 9 times before you can cognitively process that event and make a conscious decision about your response. There's no, it's not, the brain doesn't have time, doesn't take time. It's not supposed to take time to think, it's supposed to react. And we send that person to anger management because they flew off the handle, or um, we give them some exercise to do, a spiritual exercise. We say fast and pray. And I have nothing against fasting, absolutely nothing against prayer, but that system operates so quickly that you don't have time to use what you learned in anger management. How many of you ever put your hand on a hot stove and had you operated your plan to count to 10 before you said a word you didn't mean to say? That's why we say words we don't mean to say in front of children or in front of congregants or whatever. We say words we don't mean to say because that system kicks in before we even have a chance to think about what we're going to say. And the more it's used, in other words, the more threats a person has had, the faster that system becomes because threat perception is sharpened and more acute, and you have a collapse in terms of the ability to respond with self-awareness and self-reflection, because all you're picking up on are the things that are dangerous to you externally. Sometimes I've heard it said about people didn't have the ability to be reflective, self-reflective. That's just not the part of the brain they're working in. So you give them, they accept an assignment in the ministry and don't see what they um, are bringing into that task. They see what others are bringing to the task, because that might feel threatening to them, because that's all their brain is trained really now. I mean, remember, new neural pathways. Their brain is trained not to look reflectively, not for self-examination, but to see what's coming at them that doesn't feel safe. I'm so thankful that God knows us. He knows us, because one of the reasons I say we aren't to judge is because God knows that you're responding not from a space of hatred, perhaps, but just outright fear. You're responding because you had times in your life where you were scorned by people sitting in the seat of mockery, because maybe you were in a place where moral evil moral evil was you were a victim of moral evil because of someone else's decision. And you can keep going back and back and back and back, and generationally you're going to come back to what's recorded in Genesis chapter 3. It's intergenerational. Didn't start with them, didn't start with you. So remember that people are acting exactly as their history has wired them to act, to perceive, and to emote. Behavior should not be the first point of intervention. What we have to do is create safe spaces where a person doesn't feel the need to stay in that hot system. This goes along with community advocacy, because sometimes the community is the lion. For some people, law enforcement can be the lion. We have to identify the lions in the environment, and then help that person to experience places where they can relax, where they can be in that cool system, because all they're trying to do is protect themselves. That's the paradox. Trauma behavior is protective behavior. So what are the basic tenets of responding to this? And then my time is winding down. The basic requirements of trauma-informed ministry care. What is it? It is an organizational culture that sees and recognizes the effects of all types of trauma. It means that we operate in our scope of service, and we refer to the experts for the appropriate interventions when they're necessary. We emphasize safety, but not just physical safety, but psychological safety and emotional safety for both our members and for our ministry leaders, because we need to help trauma survivors build a sense of control and empowerment. The thing about traumatic events is that the victim never feels like they are in control, because they really aren't. There's something bigger, more powerful, more dangerous than they can fight. With that, people don't trust. Survivors of trauma often don't trust people. Maybe you can think of something in your own life that was traumatic. And to this day, maybe you struggle with trusting. Trauma-informed ministry care will help build trust, just as trauma damages trust. Trauma-informed care, trauma-informed ministry builds trust. You see, in our standard paradigms, we're asking what's wrong with the person. A trauma-informed paradigm is asking what happened. A standard paradigm asks what's wrong with you. A trauma-informed paradigm says, what's strong with you? A standard paradigm doesn't ask historical questions about factors, but the trauma-informed paradigm does. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your family life, your community, not in an interrogative way, not in a judgmental way, in a conversational way, getting to know people, asking about their histories, asking about how things affected them, and assessing whether or not the things that happened to them or to their ancestors may be contributing to their fight-flight response, may be contributing to the fruit of mistrust and anger, those fruits that we showed at the top of the tree. In the standard view, trust is assumed. Relationships are very hierarchical. Safety is assumed, and the person that you are, your congregant or your ministry leader or that person in the nursing home or in the hospital or wherever, they're just a passive recipient of doing what other people tell them to do. In a trauma-informed view, we know that trust develops over time. Decisions are made collaboratively. Steps are taken to ensure safety. And that nursing home resident, that person that you visit in your chaplaincy or in your congregation, they're encouraged with skills to the skill development to express the choices. Excuse me, what can you do tomorrow? You can begin to incorporate this trauma-informed lens into all of your ministry conversations. Questions like, you start with, yourself. How could this behavior make sense as a reaction to that person's past trauma? What might this person need to avoid reliving their trauma in the future? What's the impact of the trauma? Excuse me, not the sources. What's the impact? That's what you can do. I've got some resources, some books. Excuse me, something is in my throat. These are 2 books I've written. You can access them there via that bit.ly link. I have a podcast called The Multicultural Mindset. It's on YouTube and it's about to go on to Spotify and iHeart and other platforms. So you're welcome to visit me on YouTube, either under my name or The Multicultural Mindset, and learn more about trauma responses, how to respond to especially people of color, racialized communities. How do we respond to them? How do we change the way we serve people who we know have histories of trauma or people who we don't know but suspect they may have histories of trauma? So I want to open up for questions, if we have a couple minutes. And
Yes.
Jocelyn, if you will help me with the chat, I'd
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yes, everyone, please do drop your questions. I see what was already shared, folks wanting to be able to see those diagrams or the slides
Okay.
afterwards. And then someone named that this was powerful. If there are any other questions, y'all want to drop those in the chat now? We have a few minutes.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Hey, anything else, y'all?
Any questions about the trauma tree? Questions about these all these labels? I try to make things simple. I like to use pictures.
Someone said the trauma tree was very helpful.
Okay.
And then we had another question with on the slides. Will we receive slides with the recordings? And then thanks for so logically and clearly presenting the topics. Someone asked, is it appropriate or helpful to share our own traumatic experiences with the person we are caring for who is dealing with trauma?
Oh, good question. That is a case by case basis. That's what I'll say to that. Case by case basis. Um, and I think you really have to be just led spiritually to know when to share. Sometimes I share some of my traumatic events and experiences, um, but I make that brief just to normalize the fact that everybody's hurting and normalize the capability and possibility for healing, for being like that solid tree by by the rivers of living water. Just to show, not that you're setting yourself up, but to say, I had to make some changes. I had to adjust. I had to change my lens of how I was looking at things. I had to recognize that we're all subjected to moral evil, natural decay and destruction and disease, and we're all subject to human limitation. Because people often get angry at God because of what they've been through, all those dysfunctional things in their roots. People get angry at God because they believe God has put that on them. And I use my own stories to say God didn't cause that. That was caused by the human limitation or the natural decay and destruction of a body that leads to death or moral evil, and we're all subject to that. And God is saddened by that because when God created the earth, He said, with everything He said He made, He said it was good. So the world that we live in now is not the world that God intended. Um, Christ came to Christ came to give us what we need, show us what it would be like to have what we need. The Holy Spirit then gives us what we need in order to survive in a world that is filled with so much pain. And pain being, experienced by us. And Christ came to show us that there is that eternity is different. Heaven is different from earth, and to show us the give us the assurance and the promise, if we believe in Him, of a different ending. So people are angry. Often they're angry at God. I have a, a whole course I teach to counselors on therapy for people who are angry at God, because it really is about expectation, um, their experience not matching their expectation, and they become angry. And that anger, that simmering anger, can ultimately produce some really ugly fruit, the bitterness and resentment, um, that we have to weed out. And I talk about that in my book. We have to the fruit of your pain. We have to we weed that out so that um, we don't become controlled by the root of bitterness and resentments. So if you're using yourself, that's the long answer to the short question. If you're using yourself, just make sure that you don't allow the person to get caught up in what you shared. Um, you always take the risk that someone may misuse what you share too. But they may get caught up in what you share. And really what you want them to hear is whatever change you had to make in perspective, maybe a change in what you expected that didn't happen, expectation versus experience. Um, Maybe you want to share with them a scripture that has helped you to cope, uh, tools. I would just focus on that. And because I know firsthand that um, it was helpful to me when I went through a similar situation. It was helpful for me to focus on Romans chapter 8 and remember that nothing can separate me from the love of God. Whatever, something like that.
Okay.
Hope that's helpful. Mhm.
Uh, we had a slew of comments coming in. Someone
Okay.
asked how best to self-identify traumas. Love the gas pedal and brake analogy, and excellent presentation. Confirmation and continuing reality to use resources in addition to prayer. Um, I listened to the presentation from the perspective of supporting individuals who are carrying trauma, and I am assuming these principles could apply to communities as well. Is this a reasonable assumption? And some continued thank yous. So, how best to self-identify traumas, and um, can these principles apply to communities?
Okay. I'm thinking that self-identify means identify your own traumatic things that you carry as a result of traumatic events. So recognizing your own trauma. And, counseling is always in order. I think everybody needs therapy. But if an event was traumatic, if you're unable to shake it, you have invasive thoughts about it, you have changes in your life, like you want to avoid things, you want to you're curious about what happened, and yet you don't even want to think about it. On the other hand, it leaves lasting marks on you. You realize, I don't feel safe. I don't trust. um I worry about this, I worry about that, I have dreams, I relive things. um Varying degrees, it can be one or two, three, four of those things. It could be a longer list. But if you are experiencing lasting effects that hinder your ability to see things objectively, that hinder your ability to stay in the present, then some counseling would be in order to get confirmation that that what you experienced was traumatic for you. And then you can work on from there, you can work on what you need to do to experience post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic stress. Is it true for communities? Yes, entire communities can be traumatized. Um, I'm trying to think. Entire communities that survive, say, a massive hurricane flood situation, the entire community can be in trauma, and can then respond to each other, to people in the community and outside of the community, with their fight or flight. Um, we talk about historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, even race-based trauma. We talk about community trauma, and that's why we need first responders. So say, I'll give a good example comes to mind. You have an active shooter situation in a school. That entire school community is going to be traumatized. Not just the people in the building, not just the teachers and the students in the building or the administrators at the time, but every parent of every child has the potential to walk away having been traumatized by that. Now, it doesn't mean that they have post-traumatic stress syndrome, or PTSD disorder, rather. Doesn't mean they have post-traumatic stress disorder. Some people can experience a traumatic event and not develop PTSD. Some people, when there's no telling who is going to develop PTSD from the same event, that allows someone else to just walk away and remember it, but not be adversely impacted by it. Every response is different. The event can be traumatic, but it doesn't have to lead to PTSD. But yes, entire communities can be traumatized.
Okay.
Racial violence traumatizes communities.
Yeah.
Black community.
That relates to this last comment on community trauma, thinking about the Tulsa race massacre. I didn't understand the
Yes.
trauma when I moved to Tulsa over 46 years ago. It is generation.
Hmm.
And then we have
Uh-huh.
this final question on a Vietnam veteran with PTSD and Parkinson's. We often have to curtail their responses to unhoused people. They are in therapy. How should we as pastors and elders respond to this congregant yelling at members, tenants, and the
Oh. Oh. Wow. If they are in a leadership position, for instance, um, you can explain that there's they may not intend to do harm, but they're unintentionally harming people with their responses, and tell them that you need them to be willing to go to counseling if they want to continue in that leadership role. Um, if they're if they're not a leader and you don't have that kind of they don't have that kind of leverage, I think you have to just sit down and help them to see, and this is regardless, no matter who they are, it's important to sit down and try to help them see what's happening. But at the same time, remember again, if they go into if they when they get triggered, or if they're just, always at that place of like 9.9 and on a scale of 10 with seething anger, the brain does not have time when they get triggered, does not have time to say, wait a minute, I got to think about these consequences before I do this. I might hurt someone. I might, so there can be a lot of different reasons for that. Um, it could be a trauma response. It could be something else diagnostically. Um, that really requires professional intervention. And that's the thing about the thing about ministry is we don't turn people away because they're hurting. I've seen on too many occasions people who were struggling with something like schizophrenia be almost demonized because we didn't the church, I should say, the church didn't understand what they were dealing with, and they didn't know what to do. So a couple churches made decisions to not keep their doors open to individuals. Um, that's so hard. I think that you have to it's a case by case situation. Case by case situation. I'll tell you what I did with a family one time. I had a woman seeing me for counseling services who actually developed PTSD from working in the school system when COVID broke out, and the fear and the chaos and the sense of overwhelm just caused her to just really just essentially shut down. Hypervigilance now. She doesn't see you coming. She jumps out, she's afraid. She doesn't remember a lot. I won't go into all the symptoms, but it was a classic PTSD. And she was mentioning that her family just didn't understand what she was going through. And I said, "Do you need some help explaining it to them?" And she said, "I do." I offered to have her village in on a call. Um, that was something that was very non-traditional because counselors just are not trained to take into consideration that culturally, while it might be seen as unethical or not practical or non-conventional. I believe that's what she and her family needed. They needed to have me help her explain her experience. So I agreed to do that. I thought it was going to be maybe 8 or 10 people, like her immediate family and maybe her mother and her siblings. The day of the call, she had invited 30 plus people. She invited her extended village. She invited her pastors, her church community. She invited the ushers at the church so they could understand why she needs to sit in certain places and why loud noises and such hurt her ears. And um, I had to explain to them that teasing her and making jokes about it and laughing was doing more harm than good. That was not cheering her up. That was not being lighthearted. What they needed to be was respectful with regard to the accommodations that she was asking for. Be respectful when she doesn't want to be in a place, when she wants to leave a place as soon as she gets there. Now, she and I were working on overcoming all of that so that that was not her normal. And within, a few years, she was able to go to events. She was able to engage and volunteer once again at the church and do different things. But that took time. That was a therapeutic process to gradually try to increase her tolerance for those things. Now, why I say all that? Because that was non-conventional, and it meant bringing in people whom she trusted to help them explain her situation. Now, that only works whenever the person gets it and understands what they are responding to. If the person doesn't understand that they're having a trauma response in the moment, they first have to understand before they would give you permission to share with other, ministry leaders or family members or anybody that they would want in their village. But that also has to be with their permission. But the good thing about that is they can then engage the help that they need from the people who are willing to give them the help. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you about someone screaming at people in meetings. I don't know. That's where you need the wisdom of Solomon on that one because of the church's mandate, to where we don't we don't turn people away. We can help it, but we do have to consider making it safe for everyone, you know.
Okay. Thank you. And you got to thank you for that in the chat as well. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Collins, for your time with us today. I mean, I think this conversation on trauma and how we're navigating that in the congregational space could go on for hours. We could be talking all day about that. And so I just thank you for being able to put it into this format that you did today for us. You all saw Dr. Collins information on the screen as she had her email up and her website, New Seasons. Please do look her up. She does excellent trainings, wonderful speaker, as you all witnessed. And so please do reach out to her to come to your events, your churches, and so on. But thank you so much again, Dr. Collins, for your sharing.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy it. Thank you.
You're so welcome. All right, everyone. Well, we're going to transition. A couple of things I want to note. We're going to shift over into our next session now. But when we go on our break, so our break time has shifted just a little bit. That will be at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. Our tech team will be switching our format so that we're able to have conversation with each other. There was a tech issue in which it wasn't set up like that originally. So we will be doing that. So what that means is that when we go on our break, you will have to go back to the link again to log back in. You won't be able to just kind of stay in, put yourself on mute, put your, of course, y'all already like that, but you will have to log back in. Okay. Same link, no issues. You'll just click that same link. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into our next piece here. And now we are going to be talking about clergy wellness. My colleague was going to be joining us today, but had a loss, and so he was not able to join us. So we're going to talk about clergy wellness and move through some things that you all know. And things that you all have done, but really being able to take this time as a reminder, taking this time as a refreshment for you. And so when we think about clergy wellness, this is about how we're caring for ourselves as we're caring for other people, how we maintain balance while being present for the people that God has entrusted to us. And really for me, another word that I like to bring into this conversation is rhythm versus balance, because sometimes we can get caught up on trying to make sure that everything is like even keel across all the elements of our lives when that's not really how it is, right? We all know that balls will drop, plates will crack and break because we cannot hold it all. But it's more so about what is this rhythm that we are able to develop, this rhythm that we are able to continue so that it shifts with the seasons, it shifts with whatever it is that might be happening for us at a particular time. So here is a list of some of the statistics, this empirical toll of ministry. And I'm not going to read through all of these numbers here, but basically they tell the same story, that there are small percentages of people who are feeling like they're flourishing in their well-being, in their ministry. As we see here, only 7% of pastors below the age of 45 feel like they're flourishing in their ministry, and 21% for those pastors ages above. And majority of these, you'll see the Barna Group, the Center for Church Renewal, some of these groups that are doing a lot of this research specifically focused on clergy. And so we see, right, there's a percentage of folks who have contemplated suicide or self-harm, people who wanted to seriously quit or leave the ministry, an increase percentage of pastors with feelings of loneliness and isolation, which has been an increase from, as we see, 2015, but also being a group of people who are at a higher risk for conditions that are related to chronic stress, hypertension, heart disease, as we think about Dr. Collins talking about trauma and that connection to the body, right? And she named how inflammation in the body, and very much this, anytime that our bodies are being pulled in a particular way and stress has entered, it will impact us. And sometimes it doesn't matter what we try to do to avoid it, right? We cannot avoid stressful situations sometimes because we live in a world where stressful things happen, where we sometimes can't find the right rhythm and we will experience stress, right? And stress is just this response that our body has to whatever it is that's being put on our plate. And so sometimes in the work of ministry, we talk about self-care, we talk about doing things to be well as God wants us to be well, but a lot of times we're unable to practice it fully for ourselves. And so my hope is that you are thinking about the ways that you can begin to care for yourself even more deeply. And for those who you got your self-care together, right? You have your wellness plans together. that you're able to be even more intentional about embedding your life with opportunities and spaces for your well-being. So we know why this matters, right? We know that personally, and I will say for me personally, me being well for me is of the utmost importance. Even though we are people who serve others, we want to also focus on ourselves. And this is challenging and tricky. And I have found in spiritual spaces that this idea that we put ourselves first feels very scary sometimes for people, but we have to think about we're the ones who are always with ourselves. I am always with me, and I want to be well. I want to feel good for myself so that I have the capacity and the ability to access joy and to experience life fully. And so I have to take care of myself, right? I got to get enough sleep, because if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm not able to be present, right? I got to drink my water so that my body's able to flow well. So we want to have capacity. We want to live into our wholeness, but also for our ministry, if we are not well, this is going to ripple through our congregations. It's going to ripple through our organizations, because people feel and experience when we are unwell or when we are not taking time for ourselves, right? People experience that. And we think about our church and our communities, right? We are people who folks are looking at us as models. They're looking at us as a model for what it means to be spiritually well. But also, when we think about our wellness wheel, and some of you may have looked at that wheel on the document that you receive by emails, we think about that our spirituality is related to every other aspect of that wellness wheel. And so folks have put us in that space of being a model, but also my hope is that you hold that as well, right? And that it gives you even more encouragement to care for yourself, right? This joy that people get to look at me and see someone who's taking care of themselves. They get to look at me and say, oh, she takes time off, right? She makes space for herself. She says no to people and situations versus being overburdened and overwhelmed. And so I just want to pause here. You can share in the chat what might come up for you when you think about these implications of the toll of ministry, as we think about those percentages that we looked at on the previous slide, and you think about where does this impact, right? One of the words that's not on the screen right now is family also. How we're experiencing our well-being impacts our families, impacts our friends. So just curious, anybody share in the chat, what's coming up for you as you think about this at this time? And as you think about it, I'm going to keep flowing, but as things come to mind for you, please do drop them in the chat. Even as you think about where you are in your life at this time, where you have been in your ministry this year so far, what sort of ways that you have been impacted by the tolls of ministry and what's been on your plate. I see in the chat the word how. And so if you want to add a little bit more there, I will come back to the chat. But I'm going to go to this next slide. And as I said, as y'all put those, I'm going to keep coming back to check the chat as we go along. But burnout, right? How many people have experienced feeling burnt out? Many. We don't have to put any statistics on this slide, because we know that people sometimes get to this place where emotionally, physically, and mentally, they are exhausted because of stress that has been ongoing. And so oftentimes we're feeling overwhelmed, emotionally drained. We're not able to meet the demands of our lives. We feel more cynical, as you see there. Things are not as important to us. And because we're losing interest due to the stress, right? We're not able to access the motivation that guided us into this work in the first place. Let's see. When will others help and how to encourage long lasting help in ministry? I just came back from sabbatical and I made 3 decisions about my own well being. No more than 2 night meetings per week. When I get home, no church work. And I spend my day off with my spouse rather than filling it with chores and errands. That is awesome. That is so good. So, so good. Um, I'm going to come back to this one on how others might be able to support in a moment. But we just talked about some of those signs of burnout, but here's a couple of more. There's something that's going to shift in our mood. We're drained, we're cynical, irritable, angry, hopeless. And people can feel this even if you don't think you're doing it. You might notice people are like, hey, you're getting a little more snappy than usual, or people, even shifting their behavior around you because there's been a change for you. This decrease of creativity is a huge one, right? We're in these spaces where we need to come up with themes, we need to come up with sermons, we need to come up with speeches, and we're just not able to find the creative energy. We feel like we can't even connect with the Holy Spirit as we're moving through that process. In our bodies, we're feeling tired, headaches, muscle pains, an inability to focus or initiate tasks, and having isolation where we might decrease socializing with others, and then having trouble with sleep. So as we think about stress versus burnout, what I said a moment ago is that typically burnout happens after we've been going through prolonged stress. Right. And so our bodies will naturally respond to stress if something is challenging or demanding in our lives. And stress is typically short term, right? There's usually something that we can specifically note, right? Oh, this situation happened and I feel stressed about it. We can feel it in our bodies the same way that we feel burnout. But again, our burnout is a gradual process over time. So when you notice yourself feeling kind of burnt out, you can typically not able to say like, oh, it's this one thing, because it might be multiple things over time. And let's say you say, okay, I'm going to rest this weekend. Monday rolls back around, or we'll say Sunday rolls around and it's time to preach again, and you're not feeling a shift, right? Because it's going to take a little bit more attention to shift that burnout. Okay, I see some more in the chat. Okay. If I do not care for myself and it is observable, I risk others not believing my story that God cares for me, us, and the whole of creation. Yes, I love that. Trauma reminds me that ministry must be compassionate, patient, and attentive to people's emotional wounds. It shows me the importance of creating safe spaces, listening without judgment, and recognizing that healing takes time. Trauma also calls me to approach people with sensitivity, avoid harmful language, and depend on the Holy Spirit for wisdom in every pastoral interaction. That is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely, right? Like, so we see this connection between our own experiences of stress, burnout, or trauma, and the ways that those around us and those that we're serving are having those same experiences too. But there's an intentionality that we have to carry as we think about how we share with them, how we serve them, and walk alongside them. So, was a brief overview of those things. And I now want us to, as we move into the next few minutes of talking about these strategies to be well, and as I see, some people have already shared some of those in the chat. I want us to do a brief practice together. And so soul medicine, if anybody on here was at our General Assembly workshop on soul medicine, please do share in the chat if you were there with us. But soul medicine is a toolkit and a card deck that we will be launching at the end of this year, which is basically tomorrow, y'all, because we are just about halfway. Yes, we are halfway through November now. Time has been flying, but we will be sharing this. And one of the pieces of our soul medicine deck is about a rest practice. And sometimes we think about rest in this way that we have to have hours and hours and hours to sleep. But really, we just need an opportunity of a couple of moments to just rest our minds, rest our bodies, the sensory input, just having a pause. And so we're going to pause here. And I'm going to invite us. Usually I would tell people turn your video off, but we can't see y'all right now. I'm going to turn mine off so that we can move through this brief practice. And here we will pause to stand in our rest. And so you can remain seated if you would like for this, but I'll invite those who are able to stand to just stand for a moment. And as you stand, just notice how your feet are planted firmly on the ground. Even if you're seated, you can still focus on your feet. And you might just have a slight bend in your knees to where, you're not harming the knees by trying to stand so straight. Now I invite you to close your eyes here and just be for this moment. You might notice sounds around you, but just be and just breathe. Now I invite you to inhale deeply and sweep your arms out at your side and overhead as you inhale. And then exhale and slowly lower the arms. We'll do that 2 more times. Inhaling, lifting the arms up overhead. Exhaling, lowering them down. Inhaling one more time, lifting the arms. And exhale, lower down. And now I invite you to take your hands together in prayer palms. So the palms are together as if you're about to pray. And bring those to your heart space with the thumbs kind of gently pressing into the chest there. We'll stand in this prayer pose with our eyes closed and rest for just a moment. Here I invite you to silently repeat a prayer for rest, just 2 lines, and we'll close the moment. Your prayer might be, I will feel peace in my body. I will rest with ease. I receive rest. You can just say it to yourself. Now we'll take a deep inhale through the nose and exhale a sigh. Do that one more time. Inhale deeply. Exhale a sigh. Slowly lower the arms down to your sides and just shake the arms out And if you were standing, you can come back to your seat. But if you were still seated, you can and we'll come back together. If anybody wants to share in the chat what that felt like for you, please do so as we move on to finish talking about these practical strategies. So here's the wellness wheel that you all received in your email packet. And as we think about this wheel, it's just an opportunity to focus on where we can give ourselves a little bit more care. As we know, there are some things that we'll do that touch on all of these areas. For example, if you were to take a walk with a friend, and on that walk, you also got to pray, and the walk helps you from spending money at a gym. You touched on spiritual, emotional, physical, social, financial, environmental, right? So those are some examples. So as you receive that wellness plan, I want you to think about how you will take care of yourself, how you will take care of your body, physically, psychologically, and emotionally, socially, spiritually, and professionally. And I believe that your plan also holds the space for your environmental wellness and your financial wellness. But really, as you leave our day together, my hope is that you will just focus on really 2 or 3 of those areas of the wheel for the rest of this year. So some of these additional practical strategies here. One, you want to make sure that you're acknowledging your burnout and that you are creating space for yourself to receive the care that you need, that you distance the stressors and set boundaries. We'll talk about boundaries in a moment, that you focus on your health, right? Like maybe that means that you do need to go to the doctor, and maybe there's medication that you will need. Really reevaluate your goals and your values. Maybe you're in a season where your motivations do need to shift, and that's okay. It happens. Also, exploring alternative paths and opportunities. Perhaps there is a group that you can become a part of that will be able to support you, right? A peer group. We do peer groups here at MBA. I have become a part of a professional group that has been able to provide me with some support as well. Take a breath, make a change. So we just took a couple of moments to breathe together multiple times during our day today. Get some professional help. Dr. Collins just talked about people needing therapy, right? Making sure that you are eating a healthy diet, that you're taking the supplements you need. Sometimes we can feel very exhausted or depressed, and really all we needed was more of a particular vitamin. We just had a deficiency. Getting your exercise, and then joy. Have a joy practice, right? Take time to make sure that you're inviting more joy into your life. Sometimes I will just watch cartoons in between, maybe watch a short one in between a meeting, just to bring some joy back into my space. Another thing with the boundaries, I want you to think about boundaries being a self-care practice, right? And not as this challenging thing that you have to do, but that boundaries are this self-care practice that helps you to communicate your needs and communicate clarity and safety with other people, okay? The last thing here with boundaries, you will need to identify what your needs are for a boundary, engaging your holistic self-care, because it can be challenging to set a boundary with people sometimes. You'll need to be clear with people, assertive and balanced, and directly state what your need, request, or the no is. And then after you've set a boundary, do some aftercare for yourself and for your relationship, because sometimes it can feel challenging to you and the person that you're setting a boundary with. And then you want to uphold the boundary. You will have to sometimes repeat the boundary to people multiple times in order for it to be honored. Okay. And that does not mean that there's something wrong with the way that you set the boundary. It also doesn't mean that the person does not respect you or honor your boundary. It can just be different, right? If you have not had that kind of boundary, especially with your congregations, your congregants, right? People expect clergy to always be available, but you will have to be okay with people being upset with your boundary and that you're no longer available. So an example, set some limits on your office hours or your after hours calls. In the chat, we saw someone naming, right? They only do 2 meetings late in the evening for work, right? Schedule consistent time off, delegate your task, and learn to say no without guilt. Slash, learn to walk through your process of processing the guilt, because the guilt will show up. Okay. You might feel a number of things: guilt, anxiety, and so on. Okay. Let me see if there's anything in the chat. All right. Well, y'all, we're going to pause here and move to our break. We will return at 1:20. I got the time right. Let's say 1:25 Eastern time, 12:25 Central time. Getting the times together is always a challenge for me. So we will return then. As I said to you before, you'll need to come back and click on your link, because our time here in this moment will shut down in a moment, and then you'll just sign on to the link when you are coming back. So I look forward to seeing you all, literally seeing you all when we come back to close out our conversation on our well-being and how we integrate this into our congregations, and then have some conversation together. So thank you all, and I will see you soon. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope that it was a short break, but I hope that you were able to just take a moment, get something to drink, something to snack on. Okay. So as folks come in, we will get them in the room, but in the interest of time, because we only have a set amount of time together, I'm going to go ahead and jump back in, and we're going to finish up with our piece on clergy wellness. And this last part is about some additional practical strategies and going into communal support, because I know earlier there was a comment about how we have people in our lives, or I think people around us, to also support clergy wellness. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But the first thing is this practice that we have done in one of our clergy rest practices, which is a brain dump practice or a journaling practice. And so this is where you really just allow everything you're carrying in your mind to be taken out of your mind and put on paper. And while we think about journaling, you might think it's something simple, like, okay, I'm just writing stuff down. We know that what that helps to do is free up our mental space and reduce our stress while giving us clarity, because now I'm not carrying all of these thoughts around in my brain. I have an opportunity to just release those things, whether it is releasing or it is organizing, because for many of us, we might be carrying these to-do lists in our brain and all of these other thoughts, ideas, and it's just taking up a lot of space. And so when we're able to get that out, we will feel a difference in our bodies. And so we're going to do a practice real quick for 2 minutes. And this instruction here is for you to do at any time. I suggest doing it every day, taking those 2 minutes to just free write whatever comes to mind. Maybe it's 5 minutes, you just set a timer and do it. But for us this morning or this afternoon, we are going to do this practice. So I am going to set my timer here. and hopefully have something to write on or to write with. Get our other folks in the room. So you need something to write on and write with to those who just joined. And I'm setting up, here's another one. Okay, let's let them get into the room. I think they did. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start this. I have set my timer for 2 minutes. I'm going to tell you all when. It's like everybody's coming back into the room now. I'm having to pause to let them in. So I'm going to tell you when I'm starting my timer, but basically what we're going to do is just free write whatever is on your mind to just get it all out in this 2-minute span. So I am setting the timer now. I give you just a couple seconds to finish up. And when you are done, if anybody just want to share in the chat, or you could even come off of mute to share just kind of how you feel now that you've written, taken a moment to write those things down. So you can put it in the chat or come off of mute if you'd like, if you felt any difference. Okay. Well, we will keep on moving along. I see something in the chat. I feel I can handle my to-do list in an organized form without compromising my health. Yeah. Good. Good, good, good. Yeah, it can be just helpful to just get things out. And sometimes we realize we didn't even realize that some of these things were in our minds, before we started. I see another chat. Somehow thoughts are lighter after writing them down. Yeah. Good. Good, good, good. So I encourage you all to continue to practice this. Whether you do it at the start of the day, just setting that timer for 2 minutes, and then doing it at the end of the day, that timer for 2 minutes, just to release. I know a lot of people talk about, and I know that there's been like some studies on how when you end your day with journaling and how that can really help, another thing to help with you being able to sleep well at night. See something else in the chat. I need downtime each day to take a short drive and enjoy the sunshine. Nice. Good, 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 good. All right. So we're going to move on to this last part here on cultivating communal support. This is important because while we can talk about self-care, taking care of ourselves, we are not the only people who can take care of us. We need other people to support us, to walk with us, to show up for us in times, especially where we don't have as much capacity. So earlier, I know I named delegation. It's going to be important to delegate things. And I know that sometimes that's hard because we might have the thought of like, well, people can't do something the way that I do it. But we have to trust God, trust the Holy Spirit, trust that people have witnessed you enough to know the way that you like things to be done. If that's the situation, you might have to pull in people who have not been involved, right, to delegate some tasks to support, but also our peer support networks, right? Who are the people who are doing the work like you that you can connect with? How can you set up space for clergy circles, or whether that's something that you put together to say, hey, y'all, let's just, what if, every third Tuesday or whatever day it was, what if we just jump on a Zoom call for about an hour to just check in with each other, share ideas with each other, right? You can create those circles, as you all know, and there are also spaces that where those circles are already created and you can just apply to become a part of it or whatever the process is. But even as you think about mentorship or accountability partners, all right, who can walk with you, thinking about it almost feels like these like three layers of support, of the mentorship, the accountability, and then the clergy circles on top of family and friends who are not even involved in this professional space. And so there's that part. And then the other part that is not on here, but I made a mention of this in the video I did for Clergy Appreciation Month. And so if you have not seen that video, please do go to our social media sites. I believe it's on all of those. I had to double check if it's on our YouTube page. Usually videos are posted there as well. But I gave 3 tips for our congregations to support clergy well-being, right? To say that we appreciate our clergy during that month is one thing, but then if we're not appreciating them by holding space and taking some responsibility for things that will lessen the clergy person's load, do we really appreciate them? One could argue, maybe not. But we do forget about, right, how can we support our clergy, our leaders' wellness? And so you want to forward that video, just take a look on our social media sites, and you'll see a video with me on there. Please do forward that to whoever you need to forward it to remind people that it's important to take care of you all. So as we close this practical strategies piece, I'm curious who serves as support for you. So I'm going to give us just a moment to write down, maybe write down a list. Might not be a long list, might be 2 or 3 people. But I would like for you to write those names down. And then once you've written those names down, whichever names you decide to put down, I want you to write down one thing you can do to nurture these relationships over the next week. give us just another moment here to write down, once you've written down a name, some names, something you can do to nurture the relationships over the next week. And maybe it is just a simple one that can go across all the people that you wrote down. We'll give that one more minute. Okay. Would anybody like to share anything, whether in the chat or coming off of mute, as we think about these last pieces of practical strategies and the ones that we talked about before we went on our break? And I'll just go back. We talked about setting boundaries, and we talked about some of these strategies here of ways that we can care for ourselves. So I do want to make sure I don't miss anybody if there were any comments or questions about those before we move on to talking about our congregations and how, and our organizations, and how we can incorporate mental health more. Okay, see. I can have a conversation from the chat. I can have a conversation to thank them and share where assistance is needed. Yeah, that's good. One thing that I wrote down was I can nurture these relationships by being present and checking in with them over the next week. I also noted I'm going to have dinner with one of the folks on the list and to just, hold that space together. Good. Okay. Someone else in the chat. I meet once a month with a group of former coworkers who are not in ministry. We meet next week. Awesome. Yeah, that's really good. Really good. Okay. Thank y'all for sharing. We're gonna move on to this last part of our presentation, and then move into conversation with one another after this. But as we think about incorporating mental health and wellness in congregational life, before we get into it, I would like to pause and see if there's anything that people are already doing that they may want to share. You don't have to, but if there is, if you want to put something in the chat or come off of mute to share some of the things that you may have done so far to incorporate mental health and wellness in your congregational life or in your organization, you might be leading a faith-based organization or working with one, some other sort of ministry. So if there's anything anybody like to share before we get into this, please do so.
I can share something a little bit. Um, well, thank you for the space first, and I would say like I'm a person who just recently moved to a new city, and it's hard to like meet people, and sometimes you tend to like focus at work all the time. So something that I have done, it's even with myself personally, is create my own boundaries and understand that after the clock, I have to dedicated time for myself. So what I do being intentional is like joining different groups. So when people say like, hey, can you do this, can you select, like, no, because I have climbing. Oh no, because I'm gonna go biking. Oh, I have this trivia night. So it's kind of like make it intentional for me to like really be in other spaces rather than just go back to ministry. And there's always, I feel like we have to, like there's always an email that is not being answered yet, but it's always can take for the next day, first thing. So I feel like that's kind of like being my intentional, not, I mean, it's kind of like personal, but it helps me a lot with my boundaries and not feel those gaps of like, oh, until I meet people, just fill it with work or ministry. It's no, I need to my space too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing. Yep, we need our space too. And if we're not well at holding our spaces, how can we teach other people that or model that or show that for others? So awesome. Thank you for sharing. Well, if anybody else wants to share, please just, let me know. But we're going to move into this because we have just a little bit of time left together. So when we think about some of these really concrete, educational, even ways of integrating mental health into congregational life, or even our faith-based organizations, we can engage mental health awareness. And so Mental Health Sunday is on the third Sunday of May, of every May. And as you know, Mental Health Awareness Month is the month of May every single year. And so we really encourage our churches to host a mental health Sunday service on that third Sunday of May, whether that is just centering your sermon on mental health and wellness, or having maybe partnering with organizations who have like mental health resources available in the, when folks are coming out of service or going into service, there's a table where they're able to receive some information, especially about the resources that are available in the community. So you see at the bottom here, creating a referral and resource list of mental health services in the community. That way people have access to that. But for Mental Health Sunday, last March, or not last March, but the March this year, we held our first Mental Health Sunday service workshop in which we brought in 3 clergy persons who had led some sort of mental health Sunday service or a very intentional campaign around mental health and wellness in their congregations. That webinar is available on our YouTube channel. You can go to our website and search for that if you would like to watch that to get a little bit more detail. We'll be sharing out some information in a very early spring, kind of late winter, to help folks begin planning towards their mental health Sunday services. We also do a mental health Sunday service. That recording of the service that we did this year is also available on our YouTube. And so you can go and watch that to get an idea of what it could look like to do a service focused on mental health, all the way through how we did our communion liturgy, the sermon, and so on. And then World Mental Health Day is on October 10th. And so that's also another nice opportunity to have some sort of concentrated focus on mental health. I think that all of the days, right, those observances are really key, right, that can help us to just create something based on what that day is. And we don't really have to think too hard about when or how to put something together. You can also do mental health Bible studies. I have talked about with people and seen this happen where in 2 ways, either the Bible study is focused on a text in scripture that brings out these mental health pieces, right? As we think about Elijah and being, as folks have said, burnt out or depressed or suicidal. And the message to him being, you need to rest and you need to eat, and then rest and then eat again. And so talking about the ways that we might experience depression and anxiety, burnout, we might experience even feelings of being suicidal, and that's just okay, right? It's a part of life and whatever it is that you may have been going through. And so it could be in that manner, or the mental health Bible study could be, instead of having actual Bible study, you have a session with a therapist coming in that's focused on different mental health topics. And prayer is still a part of that time, right? Maybe there's one scripture that you bring in, but that it has that different sort of focus. And so we, let's see, 2022, we helped some of the churches in the Pacific Southwest do this. And so I found some therapists who are Spanish speaking, and they got on Zoom every Wednesday. There was a different therapist who spoke to the congregation about some topics that their pastor had chosen to focus on. And they brought in some scripture. They brought in, what does this mean to God, right? And so you can partner with folks in the community, and as I see, community partnerships there for workshops or lunch and learns, right? Some of the churches that we worked with this year had a therapist, a grief and trauma therapist come in. And so after church, they had a meal, and the therapist just did a brief presentation for the congregation. So there's a variety of ways. And as I said, we are always available for any consultation, or we can connect you to other pastors, other therapists who have supported in these ways. And one of the things that's really nice, now, I don't like always being on screen and on Zoom, but I will say that it's nice that we have this, because you can connect with someone even if they're not just right in your community. So that's one of the ways you can engage mental awareness in your congregation. Well, a lot of ways to do that. And then providing support. So we can provide support to people who are having mental health challenges by either hosting support groups and hosting therapists to come into your space. And that can be open to the public, or it might just be open to your congregation. Think about things like how some churches host AA meetings, or grief share, right? Where there's this public directory and people can decide that they're coming there, or it can be closed to your congregation. And then the other thing is providing financial assistance for therapy. I've connected with a lot of churches that have put to the side a specific amount of money. And if someone is in need of that financial assistance for co-pays, I've seen churches where they will offer, X amount of co-pays for a person. So that's another way to support those who are having mental health challenges. I think too, as I think about a part of the conversation earlier when Dr. Collins was talking about people with schizophrenia, and how she, I believe, I can't remember her exact words, but this sense of sometimes we have people in our churches who present in a way that is very noticeable to others in the congregation, right? Whether it's they might have outbursts, etc. And one of the other ways that we can provide support to those with mental health challenges is having an opportunity for the congregation to be educated on what those things are, right? What is this person dealing with? Here's some tools, right? Here's some skills to be able to create a space that is more inviting for them, or here's how you talk to someone who's going through that, which also brings to my mental health first aid. And we partnered with a couple of people who provide mental health first aid. We're hoping to be able to offer some virtual trainings for that in 2026. And so you can look online, they have them in person or online to connect with, and, having your team at church go through those trainings together. so that you all are able to respond to mental health crises. But of course, always refer. So you want to have your referral list of mental health providers, therapists in your community. In the packet that you receive, there's a page that has those therapy finders online for a variety of cultural groups as well. So you can use that and just find a couple of folks who are in the community and put them on a list. So a couple of things to consider with this. Before you're putting together what your mental health ministry or resources are, you want to ask, well, what do we believe about mental health, right? You want to understand your own beliefs first. You can take the pulse of the congregation by offering an assessment on their beliefs, stigmas, and needs. And it can be just as simple as that, 3 questions, a header that's like, we're in the process of developing our mental health ministry, and we just want to know what the needs and beliefs are of our congregation. And so there's a question on, what do you believe about mental health? Is there any stigma that you recognize needs to be addressed? And what might be some of your needs or ideas even for what our congregation could do or our organization can do around mental health? And then that's going to help determine how much education, how many resources might be needed around mental health. Also, I want to think, is this a general mental health resource, or is this a specific ministry that we are trying to develop? Are there specific mental health topics that we want to make sure we're focusing on? And then how do we want to engage mental health in the church? Do we just want to do a resource guide? Do we want to do a little more in-depth education where we have maybe a quarterly workshop or quarterly webinar, quarterly meal where a therapist comes in after our church service to, talk about a topic as we're eating together? Do we want to provide services outside of our congregation where maybe we have a therapist who comes in and uses one of the offices and offers care or other maybe financial services, as we talked about, providing co-pays and those sorts of things. And then looking at what structures and protocols you already have in place. So who in your congregation is already doing mental health work? Do you have people who are therapists, or maybe people who are nurses who might be working in psychiatric nursing? You just never know sometimes. Not only who is there, but also you might know who's there, and you may not know how willing they are to support mental health work in your church. And then also think about, are there groups or practices where you can see mental health education fitting in well? So let's think about maybe your church might focus on incorporating contemplative practices. That pairs really well with talking about our bodies, with talking about anxiety and so on. Or maybe there's a group for parents or a group for young adults, right? Those sorts of things where you can really bring in some topics that tailor well to that particular group. I also want to think about limits and boundaries. Sometimes we want to do everything, but we got some limits, right? There might be issues that could come up around incorporating mental health more in your community. And then you want to be more specific about, what can we do and what can't we do? Are we jumping ahead too quickly? How can we scale up instead of trying to do every single thing? How can we do a process of how we build? And then who do we need to help us? Who might need to partner with us? See, something's in the chat here. Let's see. If we wanted to start something like this, what are the insurance liabilities for the church? A professional would be covered by malpractice, but what about the church? Right. So you wouldn't be offering therapy. That's where that piece comes into mind. If you are offering mental health education, that's a different thing. You will always want to make sure that somebody who's qualified to do that is doing that. Now, if this question, I think back to if you had a therapist come and work out of your church, then yeah, you would have to double check for where you're located, if there's any additional insurance that your church would need for that, or most of the time it would be on the therapist, right? And again, it's just going to depend on where you are and what the rules, the laws are there. Okay. But whatever therapist that you connect with, they should be able to respond to that information. Or if you just reach out to like the local board, counseling board or social work board to double check with them. And then whatever insurance that your church might already have, checking in with the company there to ask some of those more specific questions about how you want to have a setup for that. Okay. All right. So an example here of a church's mental health resource plan. So this church would have a list that includes crisis numbers, therapists within the congregation, if that's applicable, and therapists within the community, as well as other related resources. So that might be like NAMI, NAMI.org. NAMI has chapters all across the country. So maybe you include your local chapter in there, and other mental health organizations that are right there in your community, the local community services board, and so on. So you have that whole list. You also can put those therapy finders, just copy and paste those from what I sent to you all into that list, that packet or pamphlet. And you want to make sure that it's always available. So wherever you have like, what is the word that I'm looking for? The bulletin, wherever you have those, you have the church's mental health resource plan, right? Or packet that's right there. It could just be a double-sided sheet of paper, right? It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it's right there available for folks. And then you also have some information on your website, if that's applicable. And then this church hosts a one-day mental health conference or fair that focuses on various mental health topics. I have partnered with the Alabama and Northwest Florida Convocation for the past 2 years to help them design a one-day mental health focused day where there was a panel of mental health professionals in the community. And then I got to share about some mental health topics, preach a mental health related sermon, and so on. So there's a very clear like template for that can also be shared of what that can look like. And then you could have a weekly series related to mental health topics that can be Bible study or solely focused on mental health, as I said. Maybe not every single week, right? But maybe there's 1 week a month, or every other month where that is a focus. Or maybe during Mental Health Awareness Month in May, every week's Bible study, if your church does a Bible study or midweek service, it's all focused on mental health. And then finally, hosting a support group for people who are living with mental health challenges, and a group for people who support those living with mental health challenges. And so that's another idea that can be really, really beautiful and supportive, to hold space for those who are caretakers, or those who may be in relationships in any kind of form. Maybe they're not caretakers, but they are supporting someone living with whichever kind of mental health challenge. Oh no. Okay. So we talked a moment ago about the Mental Health Sunday service. And again, please go and look on our site. I'll go and find those links as you're in conversation with each other. But whether you do a sermon on mental health or you have, let's say, a prayer, right, liturgy, a song related to mental health. Those are some ways that you can incorporate that into a service. The template, so I will put that together. When I made that comment about there's a template, it's really like, okay, we've done this so many times that it's a pretty standard way to do it for me. And so what I'll do is make sure that we have that put together in document form and get that sent out to you all so that you have that resource. Okay, so we're gonna go into some groups for a couple of minutes here. And this is an opportunity to, one, talk about all the stuff we've been talking about so far today, but you can discuss any ideas that you have about mental health resources for your congregation. You can brainstorm together, you can start to work on a plan. You can talk about some of these discussion questions that are also in your packet about just present day, right? Where are you all at with focusing on mental health in your congregation and community, conversations, and so on? Okay, so I am going to stop my share here, and then we will go into our rooms here. And so you'll be able to just have conversation about what we talked about. And if you, we have those questions in your packet, if you have that on hand, I can also drop those into the chat. So we will come back. You'll have about 15-20 minutes to be in conversation. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. Well, I'll just give a moment here if anybody wanted to share out something that you all talked about, any other comments or questions before we move to our closing.
I just would like to say how I appreciate the time and the opportunity. In the when we were sharing, I was saying that we had earlier some of our elders and I think a couple of the deacons were on and couldn't stay, but what we saw was the need for an additional conversation, and so that's one of the things that is really appreciated by the NBA offering this time.
Yes, yes. Okay. Anybody else?
In our group, we discussed additional resources that we might consider. For example, partnering with local governments, their human services or social services departments, school guidance counselors in support of the young people.
Yes.
Checking with our regional ministers for those of us who are part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, because we have clergy who are licensed and certified counselors and therapists, and they may be able to provide some additional support and resources as well.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Okay. And well, no, several of our elders took mental health first aid. It was so helpful. Good, 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 good. If there is nothing else as far as sharing, I will note that we will continue to expand this conversation, this summit that we had today for sure. So please be on the lookout for what is upcoming. I will note that in January, we are doing a clergy wellness focus that month. And so we'll be sharing some details about that next month. But for what is upcoming, next month in December, which is just around the corner, these are some of our events, and I'm just going to drop our event page in the chat. These are some of our events for December. We are doing our Rhythms of Grace Advent Pause for Clergy. And this year I started doing this quarterly rest practice because I feel like we can talk all day long about these ways to take care of ourselves. And it's a very different thing to come together and actually practice rest, engage in some wellness practices. So please do register for that and join us for our Advent pause. And we're intentional because I know that folks are very busy during December. It's Advent. And so just kick it off with an opportunity to pause with us. We'll also have our blue service for grief and loss and our soul care. And these are happening on the same day. And so that first one is going to be about 40 minutes or so, and then join us for our annual soul care, which is always a fun time to come together and practice some wellness tools, have some music, some fun together. We encourage people to come to our soul care as a watch party, so your congregation or your team or whoever to join together with us on that day. The other thing is we will have a survey here. I'm going to email the link to you, and let me see if I can drop it in here in the chat. Oh no. Okay. I'm going to email that link out to you. I got to get back to my correct screen. Doing so many things over here. Let's see. There we go. We can see. Okay. So I'm going to email, this is really kind of our last slide, but I'm going to email our survey to you. And the survey is important because we want to hear your feedback on this. We want to hear how to do this in a way that's going to be beneficial for you and those around you. So please share, how you felt about the time, your takeaways. I'll email that immediately after we get off of here. I will also send you the links to those videos that I mentioned and of our mental health Sunday service and the workshop that we did, as well as send you the link of calendar observances for mental health and wellness, so you can see what other sorts of days are available. But we have had a very packed few hours together on this Saturday. So I want to thank y'all for making this a part of your day, especially those who have to lead church tomorrow. I'm so grateful that you were with us. Today we went from talking about trauma with Dr. Collins all the way to talking about our own well-being as clergy, and then about our congregations and what we can create and having some fruitful conversations with one another. I want to remind you all that our mental health centered pieces can happen at any time during the year. And I hope that you all, took away some good things here, but remembering that we can always remain in conversation. Please email me, reach out to us, and we will connect you as we needed to. This summit was also being recorded, and so it will be available for future viewing. So we will let you know when that video is up. Usually our team will get it on our YouTube within the next week. So if there's anything that you want to follow up on, you certainly can do so. I'll be in conversation with Dr. Collins as well. I know I saw a couple of people asking about some of her diagrams. So I'll be in conversation with her about what may be able to be sent to you all. But again, you will have the video to play back. And then if you want to stay informed of our work and you're not connected on our newsletter, please do go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, and make sure you check off mental health and wellness so that you get all of our information. We do plan to do a quarterly newsletter specifically for mental health and wellness next year. So we already have your email addresses. And then if you'd like to partner with us financially, you can always go to our website and donate online. And so as we leave this space on this Saturday, prayerfully, it is beautiful wherever you are, and you are able to just have a moment away from screens and people as you log off. But I pray that you are empowered to continue centering mental health and wellness. I pray you are supported by community and your congregations as a space of sustainable care. I pray that your mind, your body, and your spirit are replenished each and every day, and that you remember that God wants you to be well, not just so you can serve, but because God loves you and sees you as good. Grace and peace be with all of you. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you for being here with us.